Hey folks, Ryan here from Mr. L's Gaming Branson Reviews, and I've got a review for you this week. And this week I'm going to be taking a look at, grab your web shooters, because we're taking a look at Marvel Champions Sinister Motives, which is a campaign box that I've been very excited for this particular game. Marvel Champions has turned into kind of a lifestyle kind of game for myself. I own literally every single pack that has been released so far. Oh gosh, it's just so good. I love the game. I love the deck building and everything like that. Now, when Sinister Motives came out, I had to have it because Miles Morales, Spider-Man, Gwen Stacy, Ghost Spider, two really awesome characters that the game really needs. So yeah, now this is going to be a little bit different of a review. I'm not going to teach you how to play Marvel Champions. It's quite a big game type of thing, but I'm just going to be taking a look at all of the different components. I'm going to take a look at the two hero decks in quite a bit of detail. I'm going to take a look at each of the villains in quite a bit of detail, and I'm also going to take a look at the campaign mode of Sinister Six, and I'm going to give you my thoughts along the way. So join me at the table, and I'm going to show you everything that is coming inside Sinister Motives. Okay, well, let's take a look at our two new heroes that are coming inside of the Sinister Motives expansion campaign box here. We are, of course, getting Miles Morales, aka Spider-Man, and we're also getting Gwen Stacy, aka known as Ghost Spider, which are both bringing in really neat and cool deck designs. For the purposes of this video, I'm only going to be going over their main cards that come only to them. I'm not going to go over the aspect cards that they come with. I'll give you a little bit of my thoughts on the aspects, but let's dive into what these heroes are bringing in their own hero decks. So let's kick things off. Let's take a look at Miles first. I'll just put Gwen off to the side, and let's take a look at Miles first here. So we've got Miles Morales, and of course, recovery of 4, and he's got a response of, after you change to this form, shuffle one Spider-Man card from your discard pile into your deck. So you're going to see some of these Spider-Man cards that he has, and you're going to want to flip over to Miles at least a couple times, maybe even a few times during a game, because he's got some really cool cards that you may want to see again and again. So really kind of cool. On his hero side, we've got really good stats of 2 thwart, 2 attack, 2 defense, and he's got 2 special abilities. Venom Blast, deal 2 damage to an enemy, stun that enemy, and Spider Camouflage, give Spider-Man a tough status card and confuse an enemy. Now you can't just tap Spider-Man to use these abilities. No, these abilities only come into play on certain card effects. So let's get into those card effects. Really good stats, though. So he can be used for pretty much a lot of different things. You can use them for thwarting those schemes, attacking enemies and minions, and even just plain up defending. Though you're going to kind of see some of these cards, you're not going to be defending with Spider-Man too often, is in my opinion here. So let's take a look at a couple of the cards. Here, he has a couple web shooters. So he's got 2 of them. He's got 2 web shooters. And do you know what? These are actually the exact same web shooters that Spider-Man Peter Parker has. They really didn't even change. They didn't even change the art on this, which is actually pointed out by Riley Stock, a friend of the show here. They could have actually just changed up the art a little bit to represent Miles. Maybe a little bit darker toned of his skin rather than just some white skin there. They literally just used the exact same card from the Spider-Man deck, which puts 3 web counters on this, and as a hero resource, you can exhaust, web shooter, and remove 1 web counter, and you generate a wild resource. Okay, really handy to get at least one of these out in a game if you're able to. Super duper handy if you can get both of them out, if you get them out early enough on, but just being able to generate a wild resource is really quite huge. Okay, next we've got a couple of upgrades. We got a couple upgrades here. We've got Defense Mechanism, where after your hero uses a basic power, discard this card and resolve the Spider Camouflage ability, which we saw on Spider-Man, which would be give Spider-Man a tough status card and then confuse the enemy. Really, really quite handy. So after you use one of his basic stat lines, you can resolve that ability as long as you have this in play. And we also have Power Within, which is the same thing, except for after you use a basic power, you resolve the Venom Blast ability, which is dealing 2 damage to an enemy and then stunning that particular enemy. And so these are just one times. They come into play. They're really quite cheap. They only cost 1 resource. But then they're going to go away after you use a basic power. So these are kind of neat cards that you may want to grab back if you've used them quite early in the game. These are maybe quite possibly useful cards that you may want to grab back when you flip over to Miles and you have to grab a Spider-Man card. I quite often found myself, if I've used one of these really, really early, I went and grabbed another one, and at least the Venom Blast, because you do a little extra damage to that. And then when you play solo, which I mostly play as solo, dealing some extra damage to an enemy, especially the big boss man, really can quite come in handy. Then next we got 2 copies of Double Life here, which max once per round. You can change to your form, and if you paid for this using a physical resource, you can ready the identity. So if you're in Miles' form and you use him to recover, then pay 1 physical resource, which this only costs 1 resource. I can change to Spider-Man and be ready to use one of his basic stat lines. Really quite handy. Very situational. I found myself, I didn't really use this all that often. I usually mainly used it for a resource at times, but it does come in handy every now and then. Like I said, it's very situational. Next, we got Swing In. It's a hero action thwart, which you remove 4 threat from a scheme. And if you paid for this using a science resource, you can also resolve the camouflage ability. So removing 4 threat from a scheme is quite nice for only 2 resources, and one of them needing to be a science resource. Well, sorry, you don't have to use the science resource, but if you do, you do get that extra benefit. So you kind of want to actually do that camouflage ability, because that is going to give you this tough status and confuse the enemy as well, which is going to come into play really, really quite quickly. Next, we got 3 copies of Web Shot, one of my favorite cards. And it says, deal 4 damage to an enemy. And if you paid for this using a lightning resource, you get to resolve the Venom Blast ability. So, cost 2 resources, deal 4 damage to an enemy, and if it was the lightning symbol, Lightning Blast resource, also do the Venom Blast, which just deals another 2 damage to an enemy. So quite possibly this could be 6 damage to a single enemy, and also stunning an enemy as well. Really, really quite fun. Really, really, really quite cool. Yeah. This gets used quite a bit. This got used quite a bit by me. Mainly because also you get the 1 cost event of Arachnobatics, which as a hero action, 1 resource, remember, deal 2 damage to an enemy, and if that enemy has a stun status, you deal 3 additional damage, and if that enemy has a confused status, deal another 3 additional damage. So you're possibly thinking about 8 damage for 1 resource if all of those conditions are met, and quite often you're paying 1 resource to do at least 5 damage on an enemy, because that enemy is either going to have a stun or a confuse on it based on a lot of these other cards that I've just shown. So really quite versatile in just his hero Spider-Man cards. Really quite powerful. And then of course we got a couple supports here. We got Jefferson Davis. Okay. As an alter ego action, you can exhaust him to remove 1 threat from the scheme with the least threat. And then we've got Genki Lee, which you can exhaust him to draw a card. And if you are in hero form, you have to discard a card from a hand. So you kind of want to do this in alter ego form, because then at least you get to keep the card. You don't have to discard anything. I didn't see these ones. I didn't use these ones quite that often because I usually see them quite late and everything. The Wild Resource and Genki is really quite helpful, especially with some of these other cards that have some of those extra costs associated with them, like you need the Lightning Resource symbol to resolve the Venom Blast ability on Web Shot. That can be really quite handy, because, man, a combo that I was able to pull off, which was really quite nice, was I had a web shooter in play. Let's see if I can do this here. I had a web shooter in play, and what I was able to do with just one card from hand was I was able to use my energy resource card, the double lightning symbol, to play my web shot. And since I played with a lightning, I was able to deal 4 damage. So I did 4 damage to the enemy. Lightning, the energy resource card, got to deal 2 more damage to an enemy because of the Venom Blast and stun him. Then I was able to exhaust my web shooter to then play an Arachnobatics, which dealt another 2 damage. And since that enemy was stunned, another 3 damage. So that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That was 11 damage. And all I had to pay was 1 energy resource card, and then my 2, I had a web shot and an Arachnobatics. And that was enough just to deal the final blows to a stage 2 boss fight. It was really quite fun to pull off. Really quite neat. The aspect that they built Spider-Man with was the Justice, and they give him a lot of shield support. There's a lot of good shield cards and a lot of good shield support that came with that aspect. I have found in my plays that I wasn't playing a lot of those aspect cards. Now, a lot of them did do things like stun and confuse, which really benefits the cards that come in Spider-Man's deck, like especially Arachnobatics. Really quite helpful on those things. So, yeah, I had a lot of fun with Spider-Man, Miles Morales Spider-Man. He is going to definitely be... He is very flexible with these cards that I just showed. He is very flexible with whatever build you want to do. I'm really quite interested in seeing what an aggression build, how much damage I can deal on turns with this guy. Really neat. I really enjoyed him a lot. Let's take a look at Gwen Stacy, aka Ghost Spider. Now, Gwen Stacy is actually a very unique hero pack here, because she's got a really quite fun ability that I only just finally unlocked the potential to, or finally discovered the potential for. And so she has action. Choose to either shuffle Ticket to the Multiverse from your discard pile into your deck, or Ready George Stacy. So we'll get to those cards. But I found that I only really used her action was to bring back Ticket to the Multiverse a lot. That was kind of like one of my main things that I found myself doing with it, because, I'll get to Ticket to the... Actually, let's get to... after I do this, I'll do Ticket to the Multiverse. Gwen Stacy's got a pretty neat stat line. 1 thwart, 2 attack, 3 defense. So you're not doing a lot of thwarting with her. And she's got dizzying reflexes. Response. After you resolve an interrupt or response ability on an event, Ready Ghost Spider. That was actually quite tricky to get a hold of, or get a grasp on in the very beginning. Because essentially, after you've used her, say, to attack or thwart, she's got cards in here that after she's done her basic, done a basic attack, that it is a response or it is an interrupt. Most of the time, it's a response, and after that response triggers, she gets to stand back up. So then she gets to do exactly what she wanted to do again. Maybe you wanted to actually get that one last thwart, or get that last 2 damage on a minion, and she can do it again. And it is a limit, if you can see it here, it is a limit once per phase. So you can do that in the hero phase. And then also what's really quite neat is that during the villain phase, she can defend play a response or an interrupt and re-stand back up so that she's ready to go again for the next hero phase. That is insane. That is very, very, very cool. So let's take a look at her cards. I said I was going to get, I forgot that I put it near the bottom here. Let's take a look at Ticket to the Multiverse, because that's one of the cards that she's kind of revolving around. So it is a 3-cost upgrade, but it is also a double wild resource. Really, really handy, very versatile card that you can get a lot of things in play, and then of course it goes to your discard pile. And then you can go over to Gwen Stacy's side and do the action to grab it back and put it into your, and shuffle it back into your deck a couple times. But eventually you do want to get it down as an upgrade. It costs 3 resources, and as the action it says you can remove this from the game, discard your hand, so hopefully you only have like maybe 1 card or 2 cards left in your, shuffle your discard pile back into your deck, and then draw back up your hand size and ready all the Ghost Spider cards you control. So essentially you get another turn, which is really, really neat, really kind of cool. And you're going to want to do that late game. So, Ticket to the Multiverse, really, really quite cool card. She's got a couple web bracelets. Okay. As a hero response, after you resolve an interrupt or response ability on an event, so much just like we just read right here, you can exhaust a web bracelet to draw a card, max 1 per event. So not only you get one of these in play, so not only am I going to use a basic attack, maybe do a hero response, but a hero response will also ready Ghost Spider, exhaust a web bracelet, and also get another card. It starts getting nuts at that point. That's really, really quite cool. We got a couple copies of Web Binding, which requires, so this actually has the requirement keyword here that you need to spend a science resource. And it says a hero interrupt when an enemy would activate, cancel that activation. If a minion's activation was canceled, you can deal 4 damage to a minion. Really kind of cool. If you know that the big boss is going to come swing at you for some big damage or deal that last amount of, threat to advance the main scheme, well, you can throw down this event as an interrupt and just cancel that activation all completely. And if a Ghost Spider was exhausted, it's a hero interrupt and it's an event. So I could throw this down and she would restand back up. As long as that was the first time that it happened. Really neat. One of my favorite cards, Pirouette and Punch. Hero interrupt. When a card is revealed from the encounter deck, deal damage to the villain equal to 1 more than the number of boost icons on that card. Cancel that card's when revealed effect. So you actually get to play this after the encounter card is revealed. So then you can decide when you want to play this. That's actually really, really quite neat. Maybe it's one of those really nasty events or treacheries. Okay, got a couple boost icons on it. It's got a really nasty when revealed effect. You got one of these in hand. 2 resources down. Boom. Play it. Deal damage to an enemy. And then cancel the when revealed effect. Really quite nifty card. And of course, after you've defended the enemy's attack, and then your encounter card gets dealt to you, revealed, Pirouette and Punch, boom, that was a hero interrupt, and you can come back. Kind of see what is going on. A lot of shenanigans going on. This is actually really, really a lot of fun to play. We got 3 copies of Phantom Flip. Hero response, thwart. After Ghost Spider uses a basic power, remove 5 threat from a scheme, max 1 basic power, 1 per basic power use. So here's what I'm getting at, where you can say, I attack the enemy for 2 damage. Pay 2 resources, throw down a Phantom Flip, remove that threat from a scheme. Since that was a hero response, she comes back up, and now she can either do 1 more thwart or do another 2 attack to something. Really quite neat mechanics at play. She's very, very, very nimble. And then if Phantom Flip was not your favorite, Ghost Kicker is probably you're going to be one of your favorites, where again, it's after Ghost Spider uses a basic power, deal 6 damage to an enemy. So here you go. There's that 10 damage turn here if you really, really need it and you got it in hand. Attack 2, response, ghost kick, stand back up, attack 2 again. There's 10 damage to an enemy if you really, really, really need it, or a really, really big minion. Like again, that 6 damage could go to a really, really big minion and get rid of them. Oh, you're gonna want you want to see these and those phantom flips quite regularly. Oh, she's a lot of fun. And of course, a couple supports. Here's that George Stacy card. Events attached to George Stacy may be played as if they were in your hand. Okay, so he's got one of those actions that kind of really increases your hand size because those cards are on the table, but those cards are considered to be part of your hand. And so as an action, you can exhaust George Stacy and attach an event from your hand. He can have a maximum of 3 on there. Actually, if you see him really early in a game, he's very, very useful. He's very, very useful. And then just an extra way of being able to get him, Parental Guidance is a 0-cost event. It's an alter ego. If George Stacy is in play, you can attach an event from your hand or discard pile. And if George Stacy is not in play, you can search your deck, discard pile for him, and then add him to your hand. Okay? So if you see it quite off, if you see one of these two early on, it's really quite handy to kind of grab them up. Now, Ghost Spider comes with a protection build around it because she's going to be wanting to do lots of defense during the enemy turns. She defends, and then there's a lot of interrupts and reactions that go really well in the protection sphere to go coincide with that defense. Now, I did a little tweaking with my Ghost Spider deck, as in there's a couple 0-cost events for protection that I thought played really, really well with Ghost Spider. First off, probably the most important card that I added in, 3 copies of, was Defiance. It's a hero interrupt, 0-cost event. When a boost card on an enemy attacking you would be turned face up, you get to discard it. So not only are you going to defend for 3, then throw on Defiance. When the boost card is going to be attacking you, would be turned face up, discard it. And then that's an interrupt. Boom, stands back up. So don't get any of those boost cards. Really, really quite fun. And then, of course, to defend yourself against really big attacks that could possibly be coming, especially in a scenario that is in the Sinister Motives box, you can have Expert Defense. So when your hero defends against an attack, gets +3 defense. So not only am I going to get 3 defense, basic, throw down Expert Defense, get another. So I'm defending 6, and I get to stand back up for 0 cost. I thought these 2 cards were must-haves in this protection build. So I just swapped out some of those other cards that I thought were okay cards, but I really thought these 2 really, really shined. And I was able to do a complete solo run-through with Ghost Spider by adding in 3 copies of Defiance and 3 copies of Expert Defense and swapping those cards into the deck. Really quite fun, really quite handy. I really enjoyed Ghost Spider way more than I thought I was going to. I was really pumped to have Miles in the game, but Ghost Spider really stole the show for me. I had a lot of fun with her cards. So, okay, so those are the 2 basic here. Those are the 2 hero packs that came with our came with Sinister Motives. So let's go on and let's take a look at the enemies that these 2 heroes are going to be fighting. Okay, let's take a look at the villain scenarios that we're going to be taking on in the Sinister Motives either campaign, or you can play them all as one-offs. Let's start off with the very first scenario, and that is Sandman. So let's just push these other ones off to the side here, and let's take a look at what Sandman has to offer. Now, Sandman was a really kind of cool starting intro villain. Not overly difficult, but he can get out of hand really, really, really fast. And that is all because of this thing that is called the city streets environment that comes into play off of the main scheme, which has the Surging Sands special abilities. Says place 1 sand counter here and then discard cards from the top of the encounter deck equal to the number of sand counters here. And you can remove sand counters by exhausting characters and removing sand counters equal to the deck those characters attacks, and limit once per round per player. So choose it wisely. Now this Surging Sands ability does get kind of annoying, and these sand counters can get annoying if you don't deal with them, because Sandman himself has the Sand Blast ability, which is a forced interrupt after he attacks. When Sandman attacks you, that attack deals indirect damage. If your identity takes any amount of damage from that attack, resolve the Surging Sands ability. So you're really, really trying not to let your identity take any damage. But of course, this is indirect. So you can't have a puny little 1 health ally in front of you to take all of that damage. No, 1 damage could go to that ally, but then that other damage or the other damages must go to other places. You can't excess damage with indirect damage here. So more often than not, your identity will probably end up taking maybe a hit. And of course, any damage, you have to resolve this lousy Surging Sands ability. Okay, so his whole thing is about getting counters onto the sand counters onto this environment, and then you're going to be discarding cards off the top of the encounter deck really quite quickly if you let that get out of hand, which means, and you run out of those encounter cards in the encounter deck, acceleration tokens get placed onto the main scheme. And the main scheme is Hapless Pedestrians. Whoops, there we go. After an acceleration token is placed on this scheme, deal 3 indirect damage to the first player. Okay, so there is only just the 1 scheme here, and yeah, and you're gonna be, if you let the counters build up on this city streets here, this can trigger maybe a couple times if you don't bite it in the butt. Now, you say, "Oh, this is fine and dandy. Maybe I can just rush kill Sandman. Forget about the sand counters." Well, don't completely neglect those sand counters, because there are some things like these sand clones, and there are 4 of them. These sand clones, they only have 1 scheme, X attack, but X is equal to the number of sand counters on the city streets. Ugh. So if you let that sit there for a little bit, and it's got 4 or 5 sand counters on it, that's a 4 or 5 attack if you don't deal with this right away. And of course, it has to have the ability that, when you defeat it, resolve the Surging Sands ability. So more cards are going to get discarded off the top of the deck. Dirt Trap. It's a simple little side scheme. It's got the crisis icon, so you have to remove threat off it. It's only got 1 threat. What's so harmless? All right. Resolve the Surging Sands ability on city streets. Resolve. So you got to resolve Surging Sands twice after this. A lot of cards are going to get discarded off that encounter deck. Sand Form. Attached to Sandman, force interrupt. When you would deal any amount of damage to Sandman, you got to discard this instead, and then, you guessed it, resolve the Surging Sands ability. So nasty cards. There's going to be cards coming off of that deck quite frequently if you do not deal with the sand counters on city streets. And then Sand Smash. This is if you're in Alter Ego form, you have to resolve Surging Sands, and then if not, Sandman has to attack you with +1 attack if you're in hero form. And of course, all that attack is indirect damage. So you might have to do Surging Sands no matter what. And we got Sand Slide. Place 2 sand counters on the city streets and then resolve its Surging Sands ability. So there's 3 sand counters are going to get put on it because of this card. And then if a Sandman card was discarded this way, you have to get stunned. And there's quite a few Sandman cards, so there's quite a possibility you're going to get stunned. And then, of course, Sandstorm, which is deal X indirect damage among players, where X is equal to the number of sand counters on city streets. This could be very inopportune if you've let that build up. 5, 6 counters, have to deal all of that damage. And of course, if there's no sand counters on it, it gets replenished type thing. And then, of course, Tidal Sands, place X additional threat on here, where X is equal to the number of sand counters. So, moral of the story is, he can be really quite simple if you don't let these sand counters build up too much. Okay? But on that note too, you can get by Sandman really quite easily if you ignore. But again, if you're not playing solo, if you're playing multiplayer, you want to keep the city streets low on sand counters. That's all I'm going to say about Sandman. He was actually a really quite fun intro scenario. Really enjoyed it quite a bit. Okay, Venom, very highly anticipated villain. We knew he was coming eventually. He's a really unique scenario. Really had to wrap my head around it. But once you do, it's actually really quite challenging. In the very beginning, I think this was the villain that I spent the most time on. It took me like 3 tries, but that's probably because I was playing it wrong or something like that. But he comes in with the toughness, tough status card, and after you attack and damage Venom with a card you control, place one face-down boost card on your identity. So a boost card goes on your identity. That's really quite interesting. Well, that's because of the main scheme here, which is leave us alone, forced interrupt. When Venom activates against you, move all of the face-down boost cards from your identity to Venom. So you get punished by dealing damage to Venom if it's just like, 1 damage, maybe a puny little 2 damage. And because every time that you deal damage to him via an attack, you have to do a boost card, and then he's going to get that boost card eventually. Now, he does get around things like Retaliate. Okay, Retaliate is not an attack. Okay, it does not have the attack keyword on it. It just deal 1 damage to an enemy and everything. So he does get around Retaliate. I did figure that one out really quite early on. But anytime that you attack and damage, he has to get these. He's going to get these extra boost cards. And also, what we're also playing around is with the Bell Tower. Okay, it actually starts on the quiet side, and then anytime that you would deal damage to Venom, you can actually put counters on this card instead. So let's say I attack him for, like, say, one of those big kicks from Ghost Spider that deals 6 damage. Well, I could put 6 counters on this card. And as soon as this has 3 counters per player on it, so in 2-player games, 6 counters and whatnot, you have to flip this over. And now it's the ringing side. Now all damage Venom takes is increased by 1. That can be huge. That can be huge for us, because now all those 1 attacks are now doing 2 attack to him. He's still going to get those boost cards, though, but you're dealing more damage to Venom. And this also has the forced interrupt that if Venom would damage you or attack you and damage you, you remove chime counters off of here to reduce that damage. So all those extra boost cards he's getting is going to get reduced down as long as this is on the ringing side. There's been games that I've played where I've been playing with the Bell Tower and flipping getting it onto the ringing side. Actually, I got it onto the ringing side with Ghost Spider in a solo game, and it stayed on the ringing side because he was never really damaging me. He was really not taking. I was not taking any damage because of my Ghost Spider build, and so this stayed on the ringing side for quite a while because the chime counters were just sticking around on here, and therefore all my attacks were doing extra damage. It was really quite a neat scenario. And with that, he's got lots of symbiote type of things. Like he's got this now we're angry attachment where after Venom takes any amount of damage, you can remove a counter from here. But the big thing here is that he's getting the +1 attack on this one. So this is going to stick around for at least 2 attacks against Venom. Biting retort. Okay, Venom activates against you. Each boost card turned face up during this activation gets +1 boost icon, which is going to be really, really nasty and very untimely. We got For Whom the Bell Tolls. Remove chime counters from the bell tower. Then, depending on which side it's on, it's going to either you have to take 1 damage or you remove a threat from the main scheme. Tooth and Nail is quite a unique one. It comes with 8 threat on it. But after Venom takes any amount of damage, you can remove an equal amount of threat from here. So it's not going to stick around for very long. But this is the side scheme that comes into play when you reveal side 2 of Venom. So just maybe that might be if you're playing standard mode, that's kind of like a little strategy tip there. Then we also got Lashing Out here. Venom takes any amount of damage from an attack, remove an equal amount of threat from here again. And then treat the bell tower's printed text box as if it were blank, so the bell tower is no longer really viable for you anymore. And then, of course, when this is revealed, you have to remove each chime counter from the bell tower and flip it over to its quiet side, so it's not dealing the extra damage. Venom scenario was really quite interesting. I had to wrap my head around that fact of the after you attack and damage Venom with a card you control, and I had to kind of play around with cards you control, which unfortunately are event cards. Event cards are cards you control because they are an extension of your identity. So when you play an event card and has that attack keyword on it, you are dealing damage with a card you control. That was something that I was misplaying very early on in my first couple scenarios with this villain. But overall, Venom was really cool. It was actually really, really challenging because he does deal lots of damage if you're not prepared for it. So yeah, he was tough, and yeah, as he should be. Okay, Mysterio. Spoiler alert, I don't know if this one's my favorite or if another one of the scenarios coming up is my favorite, but Mysterio was really, really quite cool. He's got Seeds of Fear. Okay, after you resolve a boost card during the Mysterio activation, place that card in your discard pile if it has the illusion trait. Spoiler, most of the cards in his deck have this illusion trait on it, so they are going to go into your discard pile. Okay, place that card in your discard pile if it has the illusion trait. Okay? Keep that in mind, that these are going to go into your discard pile eventually. And he's got these things of when you would draw or discard an encounter card from your deck, deal it to yourself as a face-down encounter card. Instead, draw 1 card. So these things are going to come up. These illusion cards are going to come back into play because they are going to be in your discard pile and they're going to be in your deck. And they're going to get dealt to you eventually. If these schemes are, they're going to get dealt to you eventually. And so sometimes you might end up with multiple cards in front of you. And then the second scheme does the same thing to you. Now, here are some of those seeds. Here's a card. It has the illusion trait. Shifting Apparitions. They are a 1 health minion. Here, 1 scheme, 1 attack. Not too bad. Guard. While this minion is engaged with you, you cannot attack the villains. You got to deal with him. No problem. Deal 1 attack. Perfect. Except for when defeated, if this minion was defeated with excess damage. So if you did more than just 1 little measly point of damage, okay, the defeating player shuffles the top card of the encounter deck into their deck. So you have to take an encounter card, put it into your deck if you dealt more than just 1 measly damage to these shifting apparitions. So quite annoying, and they are a few of them. Okay, they are a few of them into the deck. You're going to encounter probably at least 1. Kind of annoying. So that's one way that these cards are going to come into your deck. Deja Vu. Peril. Choose to either take 1 damage or place 1 threat on the main scheme, and then you got to shuffle Deja Vu back into your player deck. What? That is crazy. Either take 1 damage, and then it's just going to go into your deck. There's no way around it. It's just going to go into your deck, and it's going to come back again. It's going to come back again. It's Deja Vu, of course. And also it gets revealed during a boost. And there's 2 of them. I played a game here where both of these were in my deck, and they just kind of kept going back in and going back in. And I thought I either have to take a damage or put a threat onto the main scheme. And like it's just and they just kind of just cycle and repeat and repeat and repeat. Fearmonger, it's got Surge. This is a really, really nasty one where you have to discard your hand and then draw up to your hand size. That's a nasty one if that ends up into your deck, and then you have to reveal it as an extra treachery card. And then we've got these illusions, these attachments to Mysterio. When you would deal any amount of damage to Mysterio, discard the top four cards of your deck. So, of course, getting you to cycle into those cards that have been put into your deck. There's a couple of those. And then, of course, then there's humongous hallucinations. Spend one resource of any type and shuffle the top two cards of the encounter deck into your deck, and then discard this one. So it's going to... That's one way to get rid of this card, because he's going to boost up his attack quite a bit, and you don't want that to happen. So, really neat mechanic of getting those encounter cards are going into your player deck in your discard pile, and they're going to come up. They do end up coming up quite a bit, and they are very annoying. He's not too bad of an enemy to defeat. Like he is definitely. It's just a very annoying fact that all these little things just kind of keep coming up, and they keep coming up, and they just kind of get in the way. And you're like, oh, I would just be over with this scenario if I can. He is a lot of fun. It's really quite challenging. Though most of my play, I'm undefeated against Mysterio. There's been a couple close calls, but yeah, he's been really kind of cool. Really kind of cool. Okay, let's get to the name of the box, which is, of course, the Sinister Six themselves. Hobgoblin, Kraven the Hunter, Electro, Scorpion, Dr. Octopus, and Vulture are 6 enemies that you're going to be facing in this particular scenario. And it's very important to note that their hit points don't scale. Their hit points are their hit points for this particular scenario, no matter how many players you have. Though the only thing that will scale is, depending on the player count, will depend on how many villains start in play with you. So in a solo game, you're only going to have you'll only have 2 players in front of you, 2 villains. Of course, 2-player game, you'll have 3 3-player game, 4. Okay. And I was really quite scared for this scenario. I thought maybe they might do something similar like what they did with the Wrecking Crew scenario pack. And I'm glad that what they did do with this scenario is not do that, because, man, I don't enjoy the Wrecking Crew that much. So glad that they did something different with this. And, of course, having the 2 main villains at a time is really quite interesting, because they have these activation orders. And then there's kind of like a token that's going to bounce back and forth between which one's going to be kind of like the active villain. And of course, this scenario operates a little bit differently, because we do have the main schemes here, okay, that have the forced interrupt of when a villain would activate if no villains are in play, resolve the ambush ability, which is choose a set aside a villain at random and put that into play, and place 2 threat on light at the end of the tunnel, or light at the end. And then light at the end this is the way that you're going to actually win the scenario. So it starts off with 10 threat, and then another 10 threat per player. So in a solo game, there's 20 threat here. 2-player game, there's 30 threat here. Okay. You cannot win unless if they escape. Okay. I got to make sure that I'm on the right side here. Yep, right here. So force interrupt, when the last threat is removed from this scheme, resolve the ambush ability on the main scheme, and then flip this card over. And again, it's going to start with 5, and then a hindrance of 10 per player again. And then forced interrupt, when the last threat is removed from this scheme, the players escape and win the game, which is fantastic. So it's all about removing threat. So what if my deck is not built to remove threat? Well, build a deck to remove some threat, but also all of the villains have the, when defeated, remove 4 threat from a side scheme. Okay, 7 threat, if there are no other villains in play, set this villain aside. Okay, so defeating the villains with their smaller hit points will remove the threat. And if there's only just 1 villain in play and you can manage to defeat him, that's 7 threat. That's actually a huge chunk of threat that you're going to take away off of the light at the end side scheme there to try to advance you. So really, it's all about keeping the villains at bay. You don't want too many of them out there activating against you. And then, yeah, defeating them to remove that extra threat off of the light at the end so that you can win the scenario. Now, of course, keeping the minimum number of villains on this scenario in play is really quite the challenge, because we've got our treachery cards that are going to bring them into play. Like, surprise. Okay, resolve the ambush ability on the main scheme. Okay, so it's just going to... and then you got to place 3 more threat on light at the end. So it gets a little bit of hinder. Okay, and then there are actual cards here. There's 3 actual cards here that will bring in the specific characters, the villains. Okay, and then if you're not able to, there's some things like put aside Doc Ock and Scorpion. If Doc Ock is already in play, you got to confuse a character, and if Scorpion's already in play, you got to stun a character. Same thing with Vulture and Hobgoblin. If they're already in play, do you take 2 indirect damage or discard a card at random from your hand? And then Kraven and Electro. If Electro's already in play, discard the highest cost card you control. Kraven is in play, discard the lowest card you control. So if they're already in play, something bad happens to you. And if they're not in play, they come into play. So there's a way that they also come into play other than that ambush effect. And then there's Partnerships of Pain. This is a really annoying card. Okay. The villain with the lowest activation order will scheme, where X is equal to the total scheme of all the other villains in play. Or if you're in hero form, the villain with the highest activation order value attacks you with plus X attack, where X is equal to the total attack of all the other villains. This one was a game changer, a game ender for me, at least. I think I had 4 villains in play at one point in time, and then this guy pulled out and he attacked me and I couldn't defend it, and I was done for. So one of these things are really, really quite annoying. Really makes it challenging. Really, really feels like that the Sinister Six is overwhelming Spider-Man, Ghost Spider. Taunting Presence is another really annoying card. Okay, attached to the villain with the most remaining hit points. You cannot resolve the ambush. If you cannot resolve the ambush ability on the main scheme, then attach this card to the active villain. Threat cannot be removed from light at the end. So if this is attached to a villain, you got to defeat that villain before you can take away your threat off of light at the end, which is your victory condition. You want to get rid of all that threat. So a very annoying card. Even more annoying if there's 2 of them that end up getting attached at the same time. You may as well almost call it game over at that point, but not completely undoable, but very, very big hindrance. Okay, and then there's a few attachments that come into play too that just really, really just kind of hinder your ability to do damage to villains or remove threat from schemes, and whatnot. Yeah, they're really, really, really nasty. This is a really challenging scenario. It doesn't seem like it at first, but man, trying just to get that last extra bit of threat off of light at the end, towards the end, if you got a few villains out there, it is extremely challenging. Extremely, especially in solo play. Because you're only the one person trying to get that threat off of that scheme. And so, man, oh man, at times it just felt like it was just going to get out of control. And of course, they're also threatening these others. That's not only the schemes you're taking threat off of. There's also the main schemes that are coming into play that are also your way to lose the game. And so, holy Toledo's, you got to be you got to be defeating these enemies over and over and over again until you finally get through to the light at the end of the tunnel. Sinister Six is, should I call it right? I think Sinister Six was my favorite. It is the most fun. It feels the most thematic in my mind for just the sheer amount that these characters are just bombarding you, and they're teaming up, and they're just nasty. They're coming after you one right after another. Oh my goodness gracious! And then finally, the one that was been set off screen, kind of a little spoiler right there. Of course, the Green Goblin is coming back, but not as the Green Goblin. We already got the Green Goblin scenario pack. So instead, the symbiote has attached to Goblin, and we are getting Venom Goblin, who is... This is a very particularly nasty scenario as well if you're not well equipped for it. He does have steady. And after Venom Goblin activates against you, move the glider counter to the main scheme with the least threat. Choose to either place 2 threat on that scheme or resolve its special ability. Now, what does that all mean? Well, there's actually multiple... Whoops. There are actually multiple main schemes in play. Okay? There's actually going to be multiple main schemes in play. And on the other sides, there are environments. And this is the main one. This is the first one here. This kind of got your setup on it. Okay, and then you flip it over at the very beginning, and then it gives you a little bit of instructions here. Like player cards that affect the main scheme can apply to any main scheme. Encounter cards that affect the main scheme only apply to the scheme with a glider counter on it. And each main scheme accumulates threat each round according to its acceleration value and any acceleration tokens. So all 3 of these other schemes here are going to gain threat every single round. There's no way around that. They're all going to gain threat. And as soon as they get to their thresholds, okay, when they flip, they become a location. They become a location. And it says location symbiote. And they all have this text that if there are at least 2 symbiote environments in play, the players lose the game. So if 2 of these flip over, boom, you are now done. You have lost the game. Okay? So the really cool, it's a balancing act here of trying to be able to remove threat from multiple schemes at a time. These are all main schemes, but you got to follow the text here. Don't misread the text that there's going to be a counter. You have a little token. I just use the first player token, and you move it across the different schemes here. And his ability is going to move that counter around, and you can either activate their special abilities, which are actually really quite nasty, and especially if there's already been one of these schemes that have already been flipped over and there's a symbiote environment in play, then there's extra nasty. So you got to really keep those at bay as he's attacking you and as all of these other nasty things are attacking you. Like, we are 1, +3 scheme, +3 attack. Ugh. He's already coming with 2/2 on the stage 1. So make sure you have 1 of each resource in handy so you can get rid of that as soon as possible, because 5 scheme, 5 attack is not fun to deal with. Okay. Then we've got symbiotic berserkers that are going to come at you with 5 health, 3 attack. Okay. While symbiote environment is in play, this gains quick strike. Okay. So there's some guys that you have to deal with. You got a monstrosity to deal with. This guy is really nasty. I had to encounter him in one of my games. 6 health with a star. While a symbiote environment is in play, he gets an extra 3 hit points. So he can actually become a 9 hit point if you encounter him later on if one of these things have gotten flipped over. Ugh. Really bad. Really, really, really bad. And then, of course, there's a whole schwack load of these symbiotic thralls, which are 4 hit points. They have guard, so you have to deal with them. And if a symbiote environment is in play, symbiotic thrall gains patrol, which means you can't thwart as well. So so you got 4, 5, 6, 7 nasties shuffled into here. That you're going to be encountering you're going to be encountering minions in this scenario quite a bit. And they're getting in the way of you trying to remove all these threats. They're really quite thematic. Tie here. They're coming at you. Of course, there's also a couple extra side little schemes. Of course, there would have to be. Okay. While there's no other symbiote environments in play, consider this a symbiote environment, which is actually really quite nasty, because if this is in play and one of these gets flipped over, that's 2 symbiote environments in play. You lose the game. So you got to deal with this one. You have to deal with this one. Also deal with it because it's got that extra acceleration icon, but you got to deal with this one. Oh my gosh, this is nasty. And then we got Joyride here. Okay, when revealed, move the glider token to the scheme with the most threat and resolve its special ability, so some bad things are going to happen. And then a couple treachery cards, spreading the panic. Resolve the special ability with the scheme on the glide counter on it. Okay? So, bad thing after bad thing after bad thing is going to happen to you in this scenario, and you really got to weather the storm. Venom Goblin is going nasty at you, and man, oh man, this one was a lot of fun too. I say that the Sinister Six scenario is probably my favorite one to play. This is my second favorite. Oh my gosh, is there a lot of calculus that needs to go on in order to figure out, okay, what do I need to deal with at this moment in time? Because things can get out of hand really, really fast. And so even having things like Ghost Spider's ability to be able to restand after doing something and doing a thing, like that's really, really huge in a scenario like this. Spider-Man Miles Morales being able to do some really big damage turns against if you have some of those big minions in play. Really kind of cool. Okay, so those are all the villains. Come join me back in the studio, and I will give you my final thoughts on Sinister Motives. Okay, before we get back to the studio, I thought I would just give you my quick update or my quick thoughts on what the campaign mode of Sinister Motives is kind of like. And for lack of better words, it's okay. I think it's an okay campaign. It really revolves around, in the back here, really revolves around this thing of a reputation track. So as you progress through the different scenarios, you're going to earn reputation points. And I really encourage players to really pay attention to the victory conditions that allow you to gain points to increase your score along this reputation track if you're really you're really gung-ho on trying to get as far down this track by the end of the campaign as possible. Because it says down here that you get, if there's victory points in the victory display, there's going to be certain cards that are in play that will have victory points. You get extra reputation if you had no minions in play, there are no side schemes in play, no threat on the main scheme, there's fewer than 1 per player acceleration tokens in play, and no one has been defeated type thing. So really get to kind of pay attention to some of those different things, and you know what, it's okay. I really kind of enjoy the progress of some of the benefits. As the more reputation points you get, the kind of get some really cool benefits along the way, like these shield tech upgrades, which are really kind of neat. You get to shuffle a bunch. I'm just gonna find them right here. Yeah, you get to shuffle a bunch. You draw 3, and yeah, and they come with a whole bunch of wide. And there's a kind of like a basic side on all of them, and then there's an advanced side on all of them, or an enhanced side is what they call them. You have to really get down the reputation track in order to, right about here, about step 13 says you can flip your shield tech to the enhanced side to get a little bit better type thing. But also there's also other things that kind of make the scenarios a lot harder too, as the reputation gets increasing too. So it's like, there's going to be these Osborne tech cards that get shuffled in. Extra threat gets placed on the main scheme. This one's actually particularly nasty. In player order, each player must search the encounter deck and discard pile for a minion and put that minion into play, engage with themselves. Otherwise, you have to deal. If you don't want to do that, you have to deal yourself a face down encounter card. So you're kind of starting off in the hole a little bit. And it's kind of, it's all right. It's kind of good progression of different things. And I don't know, I really like the one that was in here. Oh, if you get down to 21 here, you get to put a helicarrier just into play. So that was really quite neat. I haven't made it in just my solo plays. I've never made it all the way down to the bottom. Okay, and down at the bottom there allows you to put in a symbiote suit upgrade from the Sinister Motives campaign here, which, man, it's a really cool thing. If you can actually get that into that, like maybe that last scenario, I think it would be so. Like symbiote suit here, your identity gets +1 to each of its basic powers, and you get an additional 10 hit points which is really quite cool. Plus 1 hand size as well, but you're always going to get dealt an extra encounter card every time. I really enjoy this kind of build, and notice that it doesn't say campaign on it. You can include this into your decks. Any deck you want to build, if it can fit it, okay, you can put it in as a 4-cost upgrade into a thing. Really quite neat, really quite cool. So I might try to play around with some of my some builds, and maybe I might try to put that in there as well. As from some scenario to scenario, it kind of, I don't know, it's kind of lacking a little bit. There's always these things in here where every single scenario always has the exact same environment that always comes into play, and that's the public outcry. Okay, and it just comes with some counters on it, has an extra acceleration icon, and you can get rid of this by more minions and more side schemes you can defeat, which could take a while if you don't see any side schemes or minions for a while, which means that this acceleration icon sticks around for quite a bit and everything. And even if you do manage to get rid of this in one scenario, it just comes back in the next scenario, which is really quite I don't know how I feel about that. Why is it always coming back? It doesn't seem very thematic in that regard. Also, you're always going to be shuffling in Smear Campaign. Okay. It's just like another, just kind of like a bad card. It's got 3 boost icons on it type thing. That always comes in, that gets shuffled in almost all of the time. And then as you progress through the scenarios here, there's some public outcry, Smear Campaign. Oh yeah, oh right, I forgot about the side schemes. You're always going to shuffle one of these side schemes into the, randomly pick when you shuffle one of them into the encounter deck, and if it just so happens to come out, and you're able to defeat it, like remove it, then it won't ever come back into play again. Okay, it's like you fulfilled this kind of quest, if you want to call it that, and it won't come back, and now one of these other ones is going to get shuffled in. I don't know. I thought it was kind of a neat little thing. They do give you extra victory points if you can get them for the victory display type thing. They're the Mysterio campaign. More of those illusion cards that got shuffled into your deck. You have to record that number because that's how much extra threat is going to start on the Sinister Six campaign or scenario, which is really quite neat. Okay, I really, really enjoy it when things do it that way. And at the end of this scenario, you have to record any of the villains that are still in play in the last one standing. If there's any villains in play, last one standing, because they have their own modular encounter set where you actually have to shuffle those guys into the Venom Goblin scenario. Which is really, so if I won the one game, I still had 5 of them out there when I finally removed, and I had to shuffle those 5 guys into the encounter deck for my Venom Goblin scenario, which was really quite, just knowing that they were there was kind of like stressful. But yeah, overall, I thought it was an okay campaign. I like the reputation track. I kind of wish there was kind of like more benefits and stuff that you can go along the way. But it was okay. I don't know where this one ranks currently. Mad Titan Shadow was a really, really good campaign. I really enjoyed that one. Though I really enjoyed Galaxy's Most Wanted, the credits system, like the victory points. Then you can buy cards to put into your deck. I really, really like that system. Otherwise, it was a very lackluster campaign, but I really did enjoy the card buying in that one. Yeah, where there's ones, I don't know if this one, definitely the campaign mode doesn't beat out the Mad Titan Shadow, but I'm really thinking that this box has got a lot of really good stuff going on for it. So jump me back at the studio and I'll share my final thoughts about Sinister Motives. All right, so that's everything that Sinister Motives has to offer and is bringing to the table in Marvel Champions, the living card game. Boy, oh boy, I have had a lot of fun with this campaign box. The 2 heroes that come with it are exceptional. I really, really was excited for Miles Morales Spider-Man, and the deck that they provided with him did not disappoint. I really enjoy his signature cards. The protections, the Justice build that they did give him did its job. I wasn't really pumped up with the shield theme around the Justice build, but you know what? It worked. I didn't use the Justice cards a lot in mine, but I know that in other games people have been using them quite a bit, and people are really excited for that shield support to support other decks that they have been building with. And then Gwen Stacy Ghost Spider was not one that I was really excited for, but after playing as her, wow, she knocks this out of the park with her mechanic of being able to restand after certain triggers, certain interrupts or responses take place after playing an event. Really, really quite neat. And so she's constantly using her abilities, restanding, using her abilities, defending in the villain phase, and being able to restand. That is huge in this game. So you can actually do a defense and be able to stand back up. Now, they did give her the protection build, and like I mentioned, I tweaked the protection build because I thought of those two other cards, the Defiance and Expert Defense, really quite went well with what she was trying to do, and therefore she doesn't take a lot of damage when you play with those types of cards, especially getting rid of the boost card or just giving that extra 3 defense. On top of it, she's not taking a lot of damage. She's going to be staying in that hero mode quite often to utilize a lot of her signature cards and everything. So really, really neat heroes. The campaign mode, like it's an okay. It progresses you through a very, meh kind of story, but all of the campaigns have had a meh kind of story. My only complaint is that I really wish that Fantasy Flight Games would kind of, hone in on a style for the campaign. Now, a lot of people say that's a bonus. Every campaign box is treating the campaigns differently. That's okay. But I wish there was a little bit of consistency more along the way on how these campaigns. I really liked the market idea in the Galaxy's Most Wanted. I want that utilized a little bit more, adding cards into my deck type thing. Though I do like the unlockables. Like if I meet this certain objective, I can get cards into my deck type thing, like the Mad Titan Shadow type thing. But this one kind of has that too. As I rise in that reputation track, I get these bonuses and benefits, which is really, really quite neat. And at the same time, it's going to hinder you with the villain gets a little bit of extra bonuses as well. But I do really like the fact that this campaign box also gives you some extra cards that are part of the campaign only, but they can also be utilized in other decks. Like there's the Symbiote suit. That can be included in any decks. There is the Venom Ally. I didn't really touch on him in the campaign, but the Venom Ally is really quite cool. He's a big, beefy monster guy. He's got 6 health, and every time that an encounter card is revealed, you get to deal damage back to an enemy or to the villain at the cost of taking a hit point on Venom. But man, oh man, he was really quite helpful in his scenarios that he did come into play for us. Overall, the villains. The villains are really, really cool. The villain packs, the villain scenarios are really quite good, challenging. The Sinister Six scenario and the Venom Golem scenario, very challenging, very rewarding, really, really unique experiences. Mysterio was a kind of a cool one where you're actually shuffling those encounter cards into your deck and discard pile. Haven't seen something like that before. Venom was a really tough scenario, even for being a second one. Once you get your head wrapped around the wording on some of the cards there, but overall, this is an A+ expansion overall. If you're a fan of the Marvel Champions living card game, and you're actually a fan of the Spider-Verse type of things, like the Spider-Verse villains and Miles Morales and Gwen Stacy, this is a must-have expansion for those fans. And if you're just a general fan of Marvel Champions, I think this is a really, really good campaign box to pick up, because the scenarios in it are really, really fun. They bring a little bit something different to the game. The campaign mode is pretty darn good, And of course, I think you just have to have these two heroes. These two heroes are so versatile in what they can do for this game, and there's so many different builds that you can build around it. I'm really want to explore like a Miles aggression deck. I want to see exactly what that would look like. How much damage can I put on an enemy turn after turn after turn and everything like that. So those are my thoughts on Sinister Motives here. It's a really good campaign box. So at this point, I would like to say thank you for watching these videos. If you're really enjoying the content and the reviews, I ask you to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell for whenever new videos are popping up. They're coming up usually every Wednesdays, some Fridays, and Sundays is usually a rant day, so stay tuned for those. And please like and comment to this video. Have you tried out Sinister Motives? Are you a fan of the Marvel Champions living card game? Are you going to be picking this one up? Have you already picked it up? I want to know what your thoughts are on the box. It is getting big positive vibes from me. I think this one is a really good one that people should check out. All right, folks. I've been Ryan from Mr. Row's Gaming Rants and Review, and review is over.